is that special needs children in New Zealand cannot access an equitable education system. Ian, what would you say to that?
It's a very difficult topic, Wallace. I think one of the challenges...
Is it at a crisis point, is what I'm asking?
No, I don't think it's at a crisis point at all, but I do think that the real difficulty we have in this sector is determining what level of care or help or assistance a particular individual needs. And I wish there was a much easier way of dealing with that than the manner in which we do at the moment. In other words, people are assessed and they fall wherever they fall as a result of an assessment. And I often think that the assessment is far from accurate, and I think that's a real challenge that we have with this sector.
Taking an example, at random, I mean, people might be surprised to discover
the issue I just raised, some people fall through the cracks that shouldn't fall through the cracks, but I don't think that would be a generalisation.
I think for me the idea of falling through the cracks creates an image that we've got this, like floorboards and there are these tiny cracks, when the Oars funding is that my understanding is that it's identified 3% of children who would qualify for that, and there's a 1% limit of those who would be able to access it. That's not a crack, that is a gaping chasm caused by government policy. And I just think, in terms of also talking about assessments, what we're hearing from families and people themselves from their own experiences, that if you've got the money, people are paying for it privately to be able to get it to happen. If you don't have the money to be able to do it yourself, then your kids are waiting and waiting and waiting.
So earlier this week I got what is not an uncommon email from a parent who had discovered that the principal of their school had cut the teacher aid hours for their son, who's on the autistic spectrum at the moderate to severe end, from 13 hours a week to 9 hours a week without telling the parents. And when we investigated what this was about, it was fundamentally about the fact that that principal wrongly and incorrectly had decided that he had no other way of managing the range of students with the range of support needs that they had in his school. Now, he shouldn't have done it the way he did it. We do have a crisis in the system, and you'll just give me 1 minute to go back over what Jan said. When Oars was originally set up in the late, when this version of it in the late 1990s, the assessment was 3% of the population needing support. It has never been funded at more than 1%. It is currently at about 0.8%. And actually, I'm not just going to beat up on Ian about this. This is actually a problem that's existed for a long time. And money that's gone up, and both governments of different colours have tried to put more money in. But while we retain a model where parents have to compete against one another to get funding for their children, we will not fulfil our legislative obligation that every student has a right to an education.
I was going to say, before we go to Manawa, what do you say then when Minister Tully says that government had increased spending on special education by 29% since 2009?
No, well, I mean, apart from anything else, that has now been spread among a much wider group of people, because that 3% number was actually came before a lot of diagnosis, particularly for those on the autistic spectrum. But also, in that time, costs have increased. So in real terms, there's been very, very little increase in terms of funding. It's not just about the quantum, it is about the quantum, but it's also about the way and the system we've got. When we went, we used to have Oars and we used to have the reviewable scheme. And when the reviewable scheme was removed and everyone went to Oars, those parents celebrated because they didn't have to go through the annual exercise of getting money. But we all knew what would happen because it lifted the bar at which you could get entry. And that's the problem. And so they might have put some more money in it, but there is a whole lot more.
A couple of points. One, 29% of not enough is still not enough. So if it was never enough in the first place, it doesn't matter if you've increased it by 29% or 100%. If it was zero, you've increased it by nothing. But there is money there, but it's simply not enough. And the government needs to balance the books, and we get that. But let's think about the wise use of the money that they do have. Because actually the money or the policy should be determined by the people that it most affects. Now, we always say, by Māori for Māori. It should be by special needs for special needs. We need to listen more. Now, I've met with, for example, Te Rōpū Waiora in Auckland, who are a group of people who are affected by disabilities, who are promoting the policies of change that suit them and affect them. And I absolutely think that we do not have enough engagement with the people who are affected most by the sector that informs good policy.
Ria, what do you make of all this?
Thanks, Willis. So I'm here on behalf of Tracy Martin, who's our education spokesperson. But I just wanted to, when I'm listening to what the other politicians have said, is that I actually grew up with a stutter. And sometimes it still comes and affects me when I'm nervous. And I had one-on-one specialist training when I was a young girl. And I thank God that I do, because I see many kids in my community now that actually don't have those resources available to them at some of the schools. I also have a friend that has an autistic son, Alex, and the barrier that Alex had and my friend Olivia going through the school system when he was 5 was actually disgusting. She had to fight for his right to be kept safe, to be able to interact with the other children. So when we say that, when you said that it's not a crisis level, I beg to differ. A crisis is when a child is not getting a service that they are entitled to, but they should not have a barrier given to them because they have a disability. We should be able to actually know with full confidence that there is enough money there to look after the children that deserve to have the services that they absolutely need. And we can't afford to be ignorant, we can't afford to be arrogant. We, as MPs, we know in our community that our children need us, so we have to be there to make sure that they get the services that they need.